Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, coming your way to do yet another horror movie review. In this case, it's more of a horrible movie review. Coming at you to review the 2017, what I regard as absolutely just disaster by the name of Leatherface, which is another, sequel. In this case, I guess they're calling it an origin story of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I didn't know much about this. I didn't know anything about it probably until late summer last year when I found out that there was a trailer and I reviewed the trailer. And then at that time I said I'd probably go see it. I don't think it was even showed anywhere around me. Not that I probably would have ventured out to see it anyway, because it's got to be something I really want to see these days to get me out into the theater. So I just figured I'd end up blind buying it, and I ended up getting it for a gift on Blu-ray. Um, you know, So yay, I got Leatherface 2017 for a gift, and I watched it not long after I got it and was, absolutely totally disappointed. And then I just rewatched it lately because I'd forgotten all about it, because it's that kind of movie, and it's one of these movies that you don't even want to remember or whatever. So the start of the movie is actually kind of cool, where it's like, I don't know if it's what year is it? Crap, I can't remember. I think it's 55. I think the movie starts like in 1955, and they're like, it's a Sawyer family, and just like with the last Chainsaw movie, which was Texas Chainsaw 3D by Lionsgate as well, this movie is, among other entities, it was distributed by Lionsgate, but made by the same. I can't remember, the Millennium Films or whatever, with in addition to like DirecTV, which is not a really good sign. So I mean, it's the second kind of Lionsgate Texas Chainsaw movie. So very much with like Texas Chainsaw 3D, you have another rendition of the kind of the same design of the Sawyer house, or the crazy house, because they weren't Sawyers in the original movie. I don't think that name came up until the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. But we'll just, for all intents and purposes, we'll just call it the Sawyer house, where it's the same design from the classic 1974 movie that they rebuilt for the Chainsaw 3D, and then this movie. So when the movie started, it took the opening starts in like 55, I think, and it's kind of like a birthday party for, I guess, what we're to presume to be a kid at this time who's like 10 years old or something. They're calling Jed. I guess at this time we can only assume that this is what ends up, this kid, this Jed, is what ends up being Leatherface. And one of the only good things about this movie I will give the movie is the casting of Lily. I want to say it's Lily Tomlin or whatever the hell her name is, as basically Mama or whatever. I don't think they necessarily ever call her Mama, but the kind of the elder, the mother character in the movie. I thought the casting of her as a crazy Sawyer mom, as Mama, if you will, of the Sawyer family, was actually a really good casting choice. And I think she really, really fit into that part well, and really had that kind of a look that just goes really well with the kind of the idea of the Sawyer family. So that is probably, in my opinion, like the best thing about this movie, is casting of her, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. So basically, it's like a birthday party for Jed. At this point, we assume Jed's going to be Leatherface, and they like singing happy birthday, and you see a younger version of Drayton Sawyer, and presumably Grandpa, and all this kind of stuff. And I can't remember if there's someone else or people who we don't really know who the hell it is, but they put this cake on, and there's this cake on the table, and I think he blows it out the candle or something, and then they proceed to cut the cake, and it's like all this nasty, it's not a freaking nice fluffy birthday cake, it's just frosting covered guts or entrails or whatever the hell's in this thing. There's also like I can't remember if it's a cop, or I think it's a cop or someone they've got chained up in a chair with a gag around his mouth or something. I think it's a cop or someone who's that they caught, and they're having him at the party, and then they make him eat his entrails or whatever's in the cake and stuff. And at this point, this is the opening credits of the movie, and then I think like Lily Tomlin's character presents. They bring out a chainsaw, and it's kind of cool because this opening takes place in like 55, I think, or something like that, in the 50s. And it's like an old chainsaw, kind of like the one in Pieces, the one that's used in Pieces. It's kind of like the same thing, pretty much the same thing, only this one's red versus yellow. And they're kind of, this kid isn't even really young enough to necessarily even hold this chainsaw, I don't really think, but they're kind of basically wanting Jed to bring out the chainsaw, and it's kind of like they're cheering on Jed to kill this cop or whatever, whoever they got tied up in the chair and gagged, and Jed's, they start up the chainsaw, Jed's got it, not that he could even necessarily lift it, his age and as heavy as this thing looks. But he's just they're like, Jed, cheering him on, trying to make him kill this person. He hasn't got it in him. He ends up, I can't remember if he accidentally or on purpose kind of cuts into this guy's leg or whatever, and then he's unable to do it. The chainsaw drops to the ground. It's kind of cool, this shot in the trailer, I think they showed, where the chainsaw is running on the ground and it kind of pulls itself towards the camera. It's strange that, this one not being in 3D, had a perfect opportunity for a 3D gimmick where this chainsaw's on the ground coming right at camera or whatever. Just a really quick throwaway bit. And then, I don't know, I imagine, Mama and the family's kind of disappointed. I think not many moments later, like, this person they have captured ends up getting hit on the head with a sledgehammer, and we pan up to see Grandpa having done it. Grandpa's still at this point being, whatever. It's like 19 years before the original movie, so he can actually stand up and kind of walk around and do stuff more now in this movie. But the opening of the movie, is kind of okay, and the best thing about this movie, what ends up happening is then after the credits, it's like the next day or some other day, and in the same time, 55 or whatever, and you see this young couple driving down the road, and they swerve and almost think they hit this animal on the road or something. It turns out to be Jed wearing this huge, which is just clearly just not real and just foam or whatever, because this thing would be really, really heavy and awkward. This huge cow head or something, which obviously is taking off, frickin', well, you could say, it's taking off Saw, but I mean Motel Hell did it before Saw, obviously, where of course it's not a cow head in Motel Hell, it's a pig head that he wears on over his head. But this little kid looks really weird wearing this huge cow head with like this, kind of hole in his head where it's presumably where the what they call that thing? I don't know, the air gun or whatever that just shoots a bolt into the skull and retracts it. So, this kid lures these two, high school kids or young kids into this barn where they're killed, or I can't even remember what happens to the boy, but the girl is killed with she ends up falling through the barn floor and lands on the basement, and they end up dropping a motor on her, and it's just so anti-Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, granted, the movie's not called Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I don't know. I mean, for being a chainsaw, well, again, for being a Leatherface movie, I mean, there's really not much chainsaw play in the movie, and to me, even if the movie doesn't have the word chainsaw and massacre in the title, you still got to have a fair amount of chainsaw play in a chainsaw / Leatherface movie, in my opinion. And there's very little in this movie, right at the beginning and then at the end, and that's it. But so they drop a, motor on her, and this girl ends up being the daughter of like the county sheriff or something, played by the guy who was the kid in, I can't remember his name, but he was the kid in the movie, not The Pit, but the Gate. So this guy who was the kid in the Gate from the movie from the 80s is now the sheriff, and the father of this girl who got killed with the motor dropping on her at the beginning. So this leads very quickly, I don't know how he finds out that the Sawyers did it, but this leads him to the Sawyers' house, and basically he's got nothing on the family to prove that they did the killing, but what he does being a sheriff or whatever the hell he is he takes the young people. I don't know, I think there's only really Jed. I can't remember how many kids he takes, but I think there's only Jed. But regardless, he takes Jed in the state custody, if you will, having deemed the Sawyer house, just an unfit, which I would agree, an unfit place for a child to grow up. Not that I'm a fan of the state taking control of, children either, but so it's like, what's worse in this case, the state or the Sawyer family? I don't know. I'd probably rather have him be with the Sawyer family. To be honest, he's gonna get more fucked up if the state takes him. But anyway, that's another story. So that's the end of like the 55 portion of the movie, which is kind of, in my opinion, one of the best. The beginning and the end is the best for me in this movie because that stuff all takes place around the Sawyer house with the Sawyer family and stuff. Then we cut to like 10 years later. It's 65 or somewhere around that year, and we cut to the mental house, and what they basically, the gimmick in this movie is, obviously they don't call the kids by their names in the mental house. So we're introduced to these characters. I don't know if it's like, is it three? It's four like inmates. These couple characters. This boy and a girl are kind of maniacal lovers, and then this fat kid, and then this other just kind of normal build kid, and none of them are, they say in a plot point with the warden or whatever later on that they stopped calling the kids by their names that they were called by when they came into the nut house. That way, I don't know what their excuse for that in the movie is, but that way, as a viewer, you don't know which of these kids is Jed. Obviously, there's this heavy-set, larger kid, and obviously you assume this kid is Jed, but since they don't use their original names, you have no idea. And I'm going to spoil this all out, so if you don't want to be spoiled, if you haven't seen Leatherface 2017 and don't want to spoil, a big huge plot point spoiled, you better not watch anymore. So I'm going to spoil now. Ready? Basically the gimmick of this stupid movie is that you spend the whole movie thinking this heavy-set, larger kid is Jed, aka Leatherface, to be in the future, when in fact I don't know if it's probably somewhere past the halfway through the movie, maybe even in the beginning of the third act, or who knows when, way into the movie, only to have this fat kid. Basically they all break out not long after we're introduced to these characters. They break out, and they take this young, relatively attractive, new nurse, and the four of them basically kidnap this new nurse, and there's this completely unrealistic breakout scene where they break out, and then the movie becomes kind of like a Natural Born Killers meets, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So this whole movie, you assume that the fat kid is Leatherface, when later on towards the end of the movie, I'd say, past the halfway movie mark, the fat kid ends up being gunned down, and you're like, and then there's the kid who's who's just kind of normal physicality, normal fit, more fit kind of an individual who talks and is just seemingly normal throughout the movie, ends up in this police chase, getting shot in the face, and then you're like, oh my god, and his face kind of gets shot up where, the bullet goes zhoosh and just leaves a huge gash in his face, and you're like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. You're telling me that this is Jed? This guy who's been just a normal character the whole movie, just talking and actually like, I think he's like standing up for the girl that these two crazy other, basically the breakout is really kind of, when they get all out with all four of them, it's these crazy Bonnie and Clyde, crazy mental patients, and then the fat kid and this Jed, who ends up being Jed, and the kidnapped nurse or whatever, and it's like Jed's not even necessarily, bad in the movie, and it's just like you find, he's more on the nurse's side and is nice to the kidnapped nurse that the crazy, whatever, the couple, the sex crazy couple kidnapped, and the sex crazy couple kind of has Jed and the fat kid and the nurse all in a way held taken hostage. Really, it's just a situation that's all just tug and pull and whatever. It's just they got them all three of them kind of held captive. And to say later on in the movie that this kid, who was just basically, by all intents and purposes, normal and physically, just not even fat and not a large person, who Leatherface ends up being, and to say that this is Leatherface, to me, was absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, oh my god. So that's the movie. I mean, it's just like it's a breakout of the mental institution movie, and spend time running from the law movie, and going into a diner and blowing people away movie, and needless killing movie, and just, it's an on-the-run movie. And at the end of the movie, they end up back at the Sawyer house, and which would, you know, like I say, the beginning and the end for me is the best because they actually spend time at the Sawyer house, and as the movie goes on, then they end up capturing, you know, the main kind of sheriff guy, the father of the girl killed at the beginning of the movie 10 years prior. Actually end up capturing him, and for the very first time, you know, Mama, I should say, kind of sews up Jed's face and puts this leather strappage on his face to kind of keep his face, you know, together as it heals. And at this point, he's kind of, you know, resembling Leatherface a little bit with his, you know, straps on his face to hold his face, newly sewed together face together. And at this point, all of a sudden, I don't know if he's got other wounds. I think he's been shot somewhere else or something. But all of a sudden, he's like, by the end of the movie, even though he's like physically more or less fit and stuff like that, he's all I don't know if it's because he got shot in the face or he's got another wound somewhere else or what, but he's just walking all like mongoloid towards the end of the movie when he's, you know, welding the chainsaw. And at the end of the movie, he ends up getting the chainsaw, and I think he does his very first chainsaw kill, which is kind of cool and gory and whatever, with this, you know, killing the sheriff, the father of the girl killed at the beginning. He's sitting on the couch tied up or whatever, and, you know, Leatherface's very first chainsaw kill in the history of his life or whatever. It's supposed to be ooh, ah, big deal. And then the nurse who was, you know, held hostage from the very beginning towards the beginning of the movie, the whole movie ends up escaping, and they do the freaking chase at night in the woods thing, and she ends up being just, you know, pleading for her life at the end of the movie and only to be decapitated. And then I guess from what we're, you know, meant to understand, at the end of the movie, he cuts off the bottom part of her, you know, face, like, you know, from here down in her lips, and then like sews it, you know, cuts off the sheriff's top of his face and head or whatever, and, you know, sews them together, the sheriff's top face and the bottom, you know, girl face together. For the very first time, he sews a face together and puts it on at the end of the movie, and then just sees himself in the broken mirror and just smashes it some more, and that's like the end of the movie. It's absolutely just stupid, ridiculous. There's an alternate ending on this movie. You can watch it with the alternate ending, which I do like the last part of it where we actually see, because I didn't necessarily know watching the theatrical version that the bottom of the face was the girl's face, you know, but the alternate ending, you actually see her hanging in the basement, you know, still alive, I think, with, you know, kind of looks like Dark Man or Dark Girl, if you will, where, you know, the bottom part of her face is missing and it's just like the teeth exposed and stuff. So that's the thing I like about the alternate ending more. They should have, you know, went with the chasing in the woods, because in the alternate ending they don't even chase out in the woods. It's like they chase her upstairs and they capture her again, and then they cut to downstairs where she's hanging or whatever. But I would do the, you know, the chasing in the woods ending, cutting the, oh, you can't do the cutting the head off and then having her hanging there alive because her head's, okay, that's why. But that's the one thing I like about the alternate ending more than the theatrical, is the kind of the explanation of where he got the lower part of the face, and that it is in fact hers. Because, you know, call me dense or whatever, but when I saw the theatrical version, I didn't necessarily know. I mean, you know, how are you supposed to know that the lower part of the face is, you know, from her face or whatever? So 0 stars out of 4 stars for Leatherface. I found this movie to be absolutely just boring, and to be honest, watching it a second time was a little bit of a chore. The worst Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie ever made. I mean, if you think 4 is bad, holy shit. I mean, it's like, you know, the best movie ever made compared to this. I mean, if you like natural born killers and these kind of just on the run criminals movies, you might like this, but, you know, to be called a movie in the Chainsaw franchise or whatever is absolutely a complete and total joke. The only reference it has to, you know, that franchise is really, like I say, the beginning of the movie and the end. It's just a shame that, you know, they had to turn this movie into a mental patient escapee movie and do that absolutely stupid, what I would regard as absolutely stupid twist of making you think the fat kid, the large kid is Leatherface, and only to have this, you know, basically normal person who talks normal, does everything, looks normal, everything normal is the person who ends up being Leatherface. I think was absolutely stupid, because, you know, when you've got the physicality like Leatherface has always been portrayed as having, as kind of big and tall or whatever, you're not just a freaking normal physicality when you're in your 20s. Like, you've always got that big boned look, you know. So at the same time, I was kind of like the big and kind of chunky kid in the movie was a little too big and chunky. Well, that's because it's not even Leatherface, but I don't know. The other kid is too skinny. So anyway, I've probably gone on way too long about this movie. Not recommended whatsoever unless you can just stream it online for free or whatever and look at it for a laugh. I mean, this makes Platinum Dunes chainsaw movies seem like just the best, thing ever. It's funny when the remake of Chainsaw came out in '03, how dumb, I thought that was. Well, that movie's great compared to this shit, and even their prequel to their own remake was good compared to this shit. So that's my review of Leatherface 2017. Highly not recommended. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, we'll catch you next time.